Hi, this is Simon Upstill, and welcome to this rundown of my top creative hacks. Now, I know by convention I'm meant to give you 10 of them, but I couldn't quite manage that, and I hope you'll be okay with these 7. So first, a bit of background. For more years than I care to remember, I've been working at the intersection where film post-production meets visual effects meets motion graphics. And in that time, I've witnessed countless mistakes, and I've made plenty of my own. So this is my non-exhaustive list of things that are useful to think about when you're planning and executing a motion graphics project. Please share your thoughts and indeed disagreements in the comments. So the first point is a pretty obvious one: planning. Think through what it is you're intending to achieve and how you're going to go about it. Think of this as your pre-production phase. Evaluate the scope of the project and what trade-offs you might have to make, because believe me, there are always trade-offs. How long do you actually want to spend on it? How does the project fit with your existing skill set? How much of your plan is achievable using the applications that you're comfortable working with? Do you need to work on expanding your skill set before starting on this project? The key thing at this point is to start with manageable expectations, even if you decide later to expand on them. Creative ambition is great, but it needs to be rooted in what you can realistically achieve. Next up is workflow, which is something you need to be thinking about both as part of your planning and also throughout your project. Have you optimized everything so as to get the best results most efficiently and eliminate pitfalls? If a process is unfamiliar to you, make sure you've tested it enough first to get familiar with it and discover the things that might well trip you up. This is particularly important if you're passing elements of the project from one application to another. Make sure you understand the translation process. Make sure you're on top of things like color management and so on. So many people get into big trouble because they haven't tested their workflow before starting. The worst time to discover workflow problems is when you've already done a ton of work on the project. The third thing I want to talk about is references. Give some serious thought as to the aesthetic style that you want for your project, whether it's steampunk or retrofuturism or whatever it might be. Try to get a solid idea of the aesthetic that you're aiming for, even if it's your own crazy mashup of several different styles. The key to this is to gather together a scrapbook of reference images or videos or indeed music, or whatever it is that's going to help give you the feel for what you're trying to achieve. This is so much easier than simply relying on your imagination. It gives you a firm foundation from which to begin. Working within a predetermined aesthetic makes it much easier to choose what works and what doesn't. And of course, don't be afraid to borrow directly from other people's work. Even if you start out by directly copying something, the chances are that you're going to bring your own personality, your own style, your own spin to make it your own anyway. The key thing is to build a distinct world around your project where you feel at home and where the creative choices become instinctive. Now, I started out by telling you to plan, and it seems contradictory, therefore, for me to now tell you to play. But actually, this is really going to help you a lot. Instead of sitting down and trying to get the whole thing right first time, which is a mistake that a lot of people make, it's far better to begin by letting your imagination run a little bit wild, going off on tangents, just finding your way into the project. Often the very best creative choices arise out of this play aspect. It's the things you stumble on completely by chance that really fire up your imagination and allow you to create something original and interesting. If you stick too rigidly to a preconceived plan, you'll miss out on all of that. The next point is the one that I think is the most important of all. I mentioned before that you shouldn't be thinking about trying to achieve perfection with your very first efforts. The key to great creative work is essentially iteration. It's about repeating the same creative process over and over until you arrive at the version that feels the most satisfying. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the last version is always the best version. You might actually find that version 1 was the best of all. But it's only by going through that process of creative iteration that you can actually make the decision about which is the best route to go. And the key thing to understand here is that by completely immersing yourself in the process of repetition and refinement, you'll start to find the project speaking to you and letting you know what it is it needs to be. Which brings me on to the point that for many people is a major stumbling block. We've always been taught that creativity is about inspiration. It's about that spark that happens before you've even put pen to paper, as it were. And because we attach so much weight to this idea of inspiration, we devalue the part of the creative process that is far more significant, and that is the actual process itself, that iterative process that I've just been talking about. If you value your original creative thought above everything else, you inevitably approach the execution of it as merely a task or a chore, and that's not going to help you do your best work. Because in most cases, the really creative part comes from letting the process speak to you. Anybody can have a creative idea, but the real creativity comes from immersing yourself in the actual process of creation. Far from it being a chore, it's the essence of creativity. And my last point is one that so many people get hung up on. And I think it comes back to the point about overvaluing that initial inspiration. If you think that the most important thing is matching up exactly to your original idea, then so much of your work is going to feel like failure. If, on the other hand, you embrace the process for what it can show you and how it can help you, you're never really going to experience that same sense of failure. Because you'll begin to realize that mistakes are interesting, tangents are fascinating, wrong paths are full of surprises, and all of it is enriching. Failure only exists if you've rigidly predetermined where it is you want to end up on your creative journey. Anyway, those are my thoughts for what they're worth. Please share your own views in the comments, because the one big thing I've learnt is that it's a subject where you never stop learning. Thanks for watching.